All right, we're going to look at 5 fundamental characteristics of life. The 5 fundamental characteristics of life are organization, energy use, homeostasis, reproduction, growth and development, and evolution. So, all living, or everything that is considered living, has these 5 characteristics in common. Let's first look at organization. So, life is organized. Now, remember, in the last lesson, we were talking about what makes something be considered a living organism. And one of the things that I pointed out is that we're not talking about a living organism until we get to the level of the cell. But we do know that anything that is single cellular, multicellular, is composed of other particles down to the very smallest level, which are our atoms. Atoms then join together to form molecules. Molecules join together to form things like organelles. So, in this example, in the image, you're seeing a chloroplast. A chloroplast is not considered a living organism. However, it is part of a living organism. It is part of a cell. So, on its own, it's not considered a living organism. But when it is part of the cell and allows the cell to function and carry out these characteristics of life, then then it is considered a part of a living organism. So once we get to the cell, again, we may have a single celled organism and it has everything that is required for it to maintain an independent life. Many things, though, are multicellular. So when we have a collection of specialized cells that are working together to perform a specific function, that's when we're talking about tissues. Tissues in various different layers form organs. So an example of an organ would be your heart. Your heart consists of some muscle tissue. It consists of some cartilage, and some epithelial tissue. So there are different tissues associated with those. But when those tissues are working together as a unit, that unit is the organ. We have organ systems. So your heart is part of your circulatory system, your stomach is part of your digestive system, your kidneys are part of your urinary system, and organ systems make up the organism. So all the ones that I just listed, along with several others, are what would make the human body. And of course, all different living organisms have different types of organ systems. Even something like a plant, it's definitely differently organized than a human, but it still has xylem and phloem, and it has tubules that allow water to pass through it, and it grows. So it does all the things that living organisms do. A population is a group of organisms that are found in the same place at the same time. So you might have, right now, I have a population of Canada geese living on my property. You might have a population of deer that inhabit a particular area around your home. You may have a population of bees living in a hive, or a wasp nest would be a population. We also have communities. So a community is going to be organisms interacting with each other. So I just mentioned a beehive. Well, a beehive is part of a community that might, depending where the beehive is found, let's just say it's in a tree hollow. So that tree then is part of that community, and all the other organisms that live in that tree are part of that community. We have ecosystems, and an ecosystem is all the living and non-living components of a system interacting, and those ecosystems join together to make the biosphere, which would be the whole global ecosystem. So all the different types of biomes like tundra and taiga and ice cap and tropical rainforest, all of those are parts of the Earth's biosphere. The second characteristic of living organisms is that life requires energy. So we have to have a constant input of energy. Even plants, we talk about plants photosynthesizing and producing energy. Well, they are not, they are producing energy for use of consumers. However, they also require energy themselves. They get that energy in the form of sunlight. So all of the life on Earth relies upon the sun for energy. And of course, there are some exceptions. There are some extremophiles that live deep, deep in the ocean that use some other things besides energy from sunlight necessarily. But the energy that they are using ultimately comes from a system that is powered by the sun. So, in plants making energy for us, in the process of a plant growing and doing all the things that a plant has to do to survive, it is releasing some heat to the environment. So, when a consumer eats that plant, the total amount of energy is less because some of that energy that the plant had produced has been lost. And the organism that's eating it is also losing heat to the environment. Decomposers are going to kind of recycle things into the environment. So some of the non-living components, organic and inorganic materials, are returned to the soil. Some things are taken back up by other organisms. heat is also lost at that level. So, because energy is lost in the form of heat at no matter what level you're talking about, input of energy is required for living organisms. And again, ultimately, that energy comes from the sun. The third characteristic of living organisms is that life maintains internal constancy or homeostasis. So, homeostasis is just our body system, and not just our body, but any living organism, systems of checks and balances that keeps things within the range that is acceptable for that organism to survive. So, things like the amount of salt in your bloodstream, amount of sugar in your bloodstream, your body temperature. So, in this example that you're seeing here, we're looking at blood sugar regulation. So, if your blood sugar is too high, there's a narrow range, as you can see here. The normal level is between 70 milligrams and 130 milligrams. And if your blood sugar levels are too high, your pancreas beta cells release insulin. Insulin is taken up by the liver and the body cells. And so well, insulin stimulates the liver and the body cells to take up insulin. So when they take up insulin, then the level of insulin in your bloodstream actually goes down. In the event your blood sugar levels are too low, the pancreas alpha cells release glucagon. Glucagon stimulates the liver to break down stored glycogen and release glucose into the bloodstream. So now the level of sugar in your bloodstream is going up. So you're back to that normal level. So it's just a system of checks and balances. This one specifically is a negative feedback system. So it's bringing things back to normal. So we also have homeostasis systems that push things in the opposite direction. If you take anatomy and physiology, you'll learn about that. But maintaining internal constancy is maintaining the system, or is that system of checks and balances that maintains the body system. Another thing that is a characteristic of life, this is our fourth one, life undergoes reproduction, growth, and development. So, reproduction is producing more organisms. On the left of this screen, you see a life cycle of a specific type of muscle. So, those muscles, you have a male and a female, as indicated by the symbols. Can't really see the male symbol, it's kind of behind the picture, but the female signal is one looks like a little key. The male muscle releases its sperm into the water. Mussels are filter feeders, so as the female is feeding, she takes up those sperm. She's stimulated to release eggs. Those eggs go to the gills of the fish, where they mature and they are released and into the water column, and then they settle and grow into new mussels. There's sort of this life cycle in which the organism is reproducing, and that's an example of sexual reproduction because it involves egg and sperm. And it also results in mixing of genetic material from two different individuals. When we talk about reproduction, we'll actually get into a little more details about that. There's also asexual reproduction. In asexual reproduction, it's an individual who produces another individual, basically a clone of itself through various different methods. So, for example, a planarian, a flatworm, actually undergoes binary fission, and its body actually splits in half and becomes two organisms. The center picture that you're seeing here is a type of anemone, and to the right of that picture, you see a little, what looks like a polyp or a small anemone sitting on another one. This is actually a bud. This is called budding. So it actually creates a little clone of itself. And as it matures, it will break off and become an individual organism. So sexual reproduction, asexual reproduction, and then we also have growth and development. So growth happens at a couple different scales. An individual cell, when it first differentiates, it will be small. So you have individual cell growth. That's just the cell getting larger until it reaches sort of that maximum size that cells have. Um, but an organism as a whole can also grow, does that by cell division. And the development piece of that is when those cells are becoming organized and they form various different body parts, so organs, actually body structures such as like a hand or your hair or your teeth or something like that. That is development. So you're growing and developing the organism itself. At the cellular level, cells become larger, the organism can become larger, and it can develop and become complex. The final characteristic that we're looking at is that life evolves. And this particular image is the sort of the classic Darwin's finches example of natural selection. So we had an ancestor finch, and as finches moved to different islands and different types of food were available, over time, the individuals whose beaks were most suited to the new habitats were the ones that went on to reproduce. So you start to see differentiation across the islands where you have if you have finches on an island where they have to eat big, heavy seeds, you might get a finch similar to the one at the bottom of the image on the right, where it has a very thick beak that's able to crack open those seeds. If you have insect-eating ones, you need sort of a longer beak to be able to probe into holes in wood and other decaying bits of matter. And then insect-eating ones need to be able to pierce insects and carry them back to their nest, and they might have a smaller, finer beak because most insects have kind of a they have an exoskeleton, but they have a soft inner body. So those are the five fundamental characteristics of living organisms. Living organisms are organized, they require energy, they maintain internal constancy or homeostasis, they undergo reproduction, growth, and development, and life evolves.